Hello, everybody. Okay, we're just going to give it a couple of minutes before more people join us. So welcome. Welcome to the series of webinars that I've been doing on behalf of New Leaf International. A lot of the webinars that we've done over the last year have been around transformational change, but we've had a request, well, a number of requests, I should say, to do the OGSM one. So we're doing OGSM today, and that is to fill some requests to do this. So welcome, Peter. I just see Peter Gower just joining us there. Just give it a few more minutes before we get a full set of attendees. Hope you're all well. Just give it to about 3 minutes past. It's usually where people are going to connect in. Don't forget, as I go through it will take about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Don't forget to use the chat or the raise of the hand function to ask any more questions. Please use that, and then we'll have a section at the end for any questions. There's also an ebook that goes with this, so you can request that through the channels at the end of the webinar. Hope you're well. It's thanks for finding the time. Hope you find these things useful. Backdated webinars of this year are available on our YouTube channel, New Leaf International. So you're quite welcome to look at those, or combined with various ebooks if you contact the office. That's an opportunity too. Okay, just going to give it another couple of minutes as people are still coming onto the webinar. Experience tells me that we can't start straight away, straight at 3 o'clock, as people are coming in, finding they need to make the appropriate connections. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Just give it another 30 seconds and then I'm going to kick off. Very good, up to that, yeah. I don't know if people have attended these webinars before, but I use a magic drawing pad and a pen, and it helps illustrate some of the slides that I'm going to show you today. So don't fall out of your chair if you suddenly find there's a thick felt tip pen going across some of the slides. Okay, so I'm going to kick off. So we've got a good group of people. Welcome to the OGSM webinar. As I said, as people were coming into this process, this has been a webinar that's been requested by people that have contacted us. I've done a number of webinars on behalf of New Leaf International, my company, and this is one that we've put into the schedule because there's been some demand. Okay, so let me just move onto the first slide, and I'll introduce myself for people that don't know me. I'm Martin. I set up New Leaf International over 25 years ago now, ex-Procter & Gamble manager, and that was a great foundation in management. But it also, as I went into some specialist areas, it also gave me lots of opportunity to learn about business improvement, managing change, and that led to large transformational change programs as well. Academically, I'm a systems thinker. I was originally electrical engineer. Then I did a degree in organizational development that was focused on work systems, managerial systems. As you move through those 25 years, our IP, if you like, our USP is that we provide support for large organizations using what we call our integrated framework, which is fundamentally systems of activity. And that's another day, another webinar. But that's what we provide for our clients. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on other occasions. Very practical, very hands-on. So we're not, we don't focus on the academic side. We have a saying that knowing isn't doing. So we help clients implement, not just know more. And that's an interesting one with OGSM. As I go through the slides, we're taking a very practical approach to these today, how to make it work, not what it is. I think many people have an understanding of what it is, but the nuances and the subtleties of it are around the implementation, not the knowing of how it works. So we're very practical. And if you look at that list of clients on that screen, we work for large organizations. And I think that's that natural transition from working for one of the largest companies in the world, Procter & Gamble, and relating to large industries. So let me move on to the things I think you'll take from today's webinar. So there are 5 things there that I will endeavor to produce by the end of it. One is, I really want us to understand that this process, OGSM, is much more than planning. All right, so we know the words perhaps, or if we don't, I will show you on the next slide. But we have a preconceived idea that it's a slightly better way of business planning. It's a slightly better way of getting a strategy across an organization. Used well, it's much more than planning. It's much more than illustrating the direction that we're going in. It can be used for much more than that. So that's one thing. And to use it, to implement it effectively, we should be involving many people at different levels of the organization. So that's going to be a theme that runs through this webinar. And that is fundamentally different to many examples where senior managers go away and work on plans, and they try and develop those plans, strategies, objectives, all sorts of detail, but they try and second guess what will happen lower down in the organization, when actually the OGSM process encourages those people at that level to be creative about the way that they contribute to the higher level objectives in the business. Another takeaway is that when it's done well, and you've got an organization with different locations, you've got an organization with different functions, it's a fantastic way of getting people together and benchmarking across different areas of the business. So it might be a manufacturing organization that has 3 or 4 factories across Europe. It's fundamentally key to benchmark across those because they should be working from the same objectives. So I'll explain that a bit more as well. It's a way, this is for the senior managers, it's a way of keeping alignment and control, because there's a temptation, and this is all from practical experience, there's a temptation to try and give all the answers to all the people. It might be an organization with 10,000 people in it. There's a temptation to try and give all the direction to everybody in that organization, when actually you can control and align the organization by giving activities to others for them to generate their own strategies. So that's another takeaway. And then the final one, New Leaf International for one, we've been using OGSM with their clients. We either use it as a start point in a large change program, or a need to deploy objectives and strategies, or it's brought in when we're involved with clients in a transformational change and we've already created lots of waves of improvement. And then there's a natural requirement to get commonality across all of the organization. So tips that we've learned by doing that. Okay, very good. And again, I'll reiterate for the people that weren't at the preamble, any questions, put the chat, put them in the chat or raise the hand function. All right, very good. So I'm going to talk obviously about, as I said, the obvious. So objectives, goals, strategies and measures make up the title of OGSM. And it was a fundamental process that we used in Procter & Gamble in the way back in the 90s. And Procter & Gamble were pioneers of this use, and it was part of their integrated work systems methodology, and it was well ingrained into the business. However, it uses, and this is the obvious, it uses very common words. So the first problem with OGSM is, and I can sense it when I'm talking to people in different organizations, is you say, are you familiar with OGSM? And of course, the answer is yes, of course we are, because they understand the words. But the key thing to recognize is that they need joining up. So the objectives need joining up to the goals, that need joining up to the strategies, that need joining up to the measures. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to show you how it all joins up. So when it joins up and it goes back to the introductory part that I was talking about, it gives you a system or a process. Same word is system, really, isn't it? So the title OGSM isn't for individual words that we all know. It's when you put it together effectively, it is a process that makes radical change a possibility in a large organization. In fact, if you use the concept, it's well used in small organizations as well. So I'm just going to mention the obvious. We know the words, but it's joining it up, which is the critical thing that makes it important. Okay, so before you start using OGSM, which obviously I'm going to describe, one of the questions for the group of senior managers that are embarking on the use of this is, what is the scope of its use? Because what this graph obviously describes, it, if you see it as objectives and you're deploying them throughout the business, it has a relatively minor effect on the organization. It will have use, but if you engage people and you take all the nuances and the subtleties, the gain that you will get is much greater. So the first thing to do is agree, what is the scope of using it? Because often it loses its power when a group of managers think it's simply a replacement for the way that they did their annual business plan. And we always do those annual business plans. And this is just another format of those same plans. If you see it like that, you're probably better just sticking with what you've already got. So OGSM can be much more than planning and deployment of the objectives. Okay, so that's the early piece. When it's done well, there are quite a lot of benefits. So if you go back to the slide there that I was saying, that if you get the scope right and you want to really embrace its implementation, then the benefits are far more than business planning. So yes, it does what many other things do. You get a long-term vision of the business. It deploys actions amongst all levels of the organization. Now that sounds obvious in many ways, but what we see when we go into organizations that haven't got the clarity of that direction is you start up at a high level of the organization. You've got a clear vision. You've got a clear set of strategies. But when you get down to individual locations and individual functions, they're almost doing their own thing. All right. So having the right actions at the lower level of the organization that are clearly connected to the top level, and OGSM is basically done in tiers. So I'll explain that. But that's another point, another important benefit. It also aids communication, because when you start to deploy the review processes that I'm going to highlight, that creates more involvement with everybody in the business. It aligns the business to a common direction. There's greater ownership, because one of the things that I want to explain is that when objectives are cascaded to an area of the business, key people in that business should be creative and generate their own strategies. And that's part of the alignment and the engagement of process. It also gives good feedback and review processes that aren't necessarily joined up in the business. And it gives clear distinction between what a strategy is and an objective, if we embrace the idea that it's a total process. It encourages benchmarking and the transfer of best practice, and a few more. You can link it in with individual managers or key people in the organization, their appraisal system. So what are they trying to deliver? That should be connected to the direction of the business as well. And it reduces, if not eliminates, what I've put here as the flavors of the month. But when you're well structured and at all levels, you can see that people are joined up to the higher level objectives. It's more difficult for head office, for example, to put in an initiative in the business when they can see that things are actually heading towards what they want to achieve. And it stops an area of the business suddenly changing direction by trying to create a new initiative in the middle of a cascaded OGSM. So it addresses those opportunities as well. It makes good use of what I've called business tools and techniques. And what I mean by that is it puts clear purpose into initiatives like Lean, Six Sigma, all those various good quality business management tools. It puts those into the bracket of strategies of how to deliver the objectives in the business. Without that joining up, there's a temptation to think, and it's the tail wagging the dog, and I might mention that again today, is the tool, the initiative becomes more important than the reason for doing it in the business. It also gives priority and a timeline to high-level 3-5 year direction and 6 month, 3 months, even action plans at a local level. It also puts into perspective development plans, training development plans, because it becomes more apparent in the business that people are delivering a certain objective at their level that's connected up to the higher levels of the business. So when people are being developed to deliver those, it makes sense that they're going to contribute to the business's improvements and success. So the final one is linked with that. There's a clear focus that everybody in the business, whether they're working on a project, whether they're working in a team, working on a chartered project, then that is connected to the bigger picture. Okay, so a couple of things that you need to remember. We don't want to throw good things out in the organization. So if you think about the large corporate organizations, all those companies have done great work to get where they are now, and they're looking for the next level of improvement. So OGSM isn't something that expects to wipe the slate clean and start again. It's about integrating and maximizing the use of things that are still relevant, and it makes more use of things when it's a tool or technique that how it's going to contribute to an objective. So don't throw the good stuff out because you're now going to start using OGSM in a more structured way. So it's a process for putting what you're doing into a meaningful manner. So OGSM, and I always think of different examples, and sometimes they work better than others, but I often think of it like a series of drawers in a sideboard or a dressing table. It's a structure to put things into the right place. It's not about generating new things. Sometimes it's just about putting everything in, putting it in the right place, in the right level of the set of drawers, and everybody can understand how it fits and where to find it and how to use it. And that's the final one, isn't it? It not only puts things into the right place, the right level in the organization, but it joins things up. So it goes back to the old, you have to be old to remember it first time around, but it gets repeated all the time. But the Morecambe and Wise joke, you know, I might be playing all the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order. And it goes back to that concept that where people will say, well, we've got objectives, we've got goals, we've got strategies, we've got measures, but it goes back to that third point. It has to be joined up to play the proper tune, to work properly in your organization. So let's have a look at this model that is a slightly simplistic way of describing how it will work, and I'll get busy with my pen. So the first thing, and as I said, organizations will have a lot of this in place, but it's about joining it up at the right level. So the first thing is making sure that there's a vision in the organization. Now, I've seen these in all shapes and sizes. You go into the reception area of a large organization, it's up on the wall, it's framed. Some people go in, salute it, but in general, it can become wallpaper. And this is much more an active tool, probably 3 paragraphs, and it's the process of doing it with the senior managers just to get alignment amongst themselves is absolutely critical. But what does the business look like? What does the organization look like, both in hard numbers, in the sense of quantifiable things, but what's the culture? How do people behave in that future state? In that 5-year, maybe even further than 5 years, 10 years, that vision of what the better organization will be. Then out of that vision, there needs to drop down 3 or 4 themes, and those themes become the top level objectives, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. And I'll show a very simple illustration of this in a minute, but not 34, not 12. The idea of 4, maybe, large areas that have dropped down from this 5-year picture of how the business should be are the key objectives for the business. And that's at tier 1. So ideally, these are at the top of the organization. Now, what we've done with some clients is we've started in one location or one function within the business, and it's worked its way up where seniors then produce a tier 1 because the rest of the business have done their own OGSMs and it needs joining up. But in a perfect situation, starts at tier 1 and cascades down. So first of all, vision. Secondly, 4 key themes. Save money, make money, keep people safe, those sort of theme areas. And for each of those themes, what we also need then is a number, a goal that relates to the business benefit of working on those 4 objectives. Strategies are hows. So the strategies are the hows and the objectives are the whats. Now, I'm going to explain this again on another slide. So when this gets a little bit messy, don't worry about it. But when I start drawing on these things, it will end up looking a little bit like a pizza. But never mind. So strategies are how, and there's more than one strategy for each of the objectives. So maybe 2 or 3, 1, 2, 3 for that one particular objectives. And they are the 2 or 3 initiatives that the top level managers believe will produce a result in that particular objective. And again, I'll show you some illustrations. So objectives, words, goals, numbers, strategies, words, measures, numbers. So we need a number for each of those 2 or 3. And where there's a misconception with OGSM sometimes is that those numbers have to add up to the goal. That's not true. What they are meant to be, those measures, are trackers to show the top level in the business that the strategies are being implemented. So if there are strategies to improve margin or cost in the business or improve safety in the organization, those 3 things are 3 different things. And the measures are tracking how well we're implementing it. So if we're implementing a behavioral safety program or we're implementing a cost reduction program, then is that being implemented effectively? Because if the tracker says it is, and the 3 trackers say that the 3 strategies are being implemented well, but the goal isn't moving, then they're probably 1 or 2 of the wrong strategies. So it's important to track and measure the implementation, not just the output of it. And that's one of the differences with the measures. Measures aren't smaller goals. They have a different function in the model. So for each of the objectives, 3 strategies. For each of the strategies, there's a tracker, a KPI, a key performance indicator that relates to the implementation. So what we've got now, and I'll change color, what we've got now is we've got a set of words and numbers at tier 1. And the people involved have been the senior managers who lead the tier 2 areas of the business. And I'll show you some real examples of these as case studies. So these people have been involved in generating those strategies and measures, so they know what the intention of that work is. Now, because they're words and numbers, they can easily be cut and pasted into the objectives and goals at the next level, the lower level of the organization. So the senior managers have done tier 1. Now tier 2 is going into other parts of the business, which could be sales, could be individual factories, could be individual core centers, could be sales, marketing, could be distribution. Various different parts of the business have now taken that common set of strategies and measures. And once they've been cascaded down as objectives and goals, at this level, local people are actively involved, facilitated by this person, to then generate their own strategies and measures. So that location has its own strategies and measures. That location has its own strategies and measures, but they're all working to the common objectives and goals. And likewise, if you cascade down to another level, the people involved there are the, I don't know, department managers, for example. They go down and at an individual department level, they generate their own strategies and measures. So another couple of key points in this general diagram is once people are working from, so let's take away some of this. So once people are working on common objectives and goals, there's a real opportunity to learn from each other. So if this group are working from the same objectives as them, but they've got different strategies, what's the opportunity to learn that actually that strategy is really good, and if we put it into this part of the business, it's going to work as well. So there's a big opportunity to learn from different people in the business, not put their nose to the grind wheel and simply just churn out actions associated with trying to get their own objectives. There's a big opportunity to amalgamate learning. And the other key point here is about reviewing. So what I've seen done less well is the senior people here try and second guess what everybody else in the organization needs to do at that level. But if we leave those people to be creative and initiate their own strategies, the review processes at various frequencies can allow managers at different levels of the organization to ensure that there's a process, a review process, to make sure that things are joined up. So instead of going down to this level and saying you've got to save £20 million, which is up here, those strategies are more about what they can do to contribute to their own cost saving. And with review processes, there's a realization that what they're working on there will contribute to that bigger number. But go to that area of the organization and simply ask them to save £20 million. It's not even a lottery win. So it's not relative to their day-to-day work as much as their own personal strategies would be. And those personal strategies at a lower level, or department strategies, can then be converted into individual action plans or team charters where groups of people are working on them, on the strategies as projects. And again, it's that alignment that I talked about at the beginning of the webinar, that if people are working on things, there's a clear line to the top. So the last point on here is just to talk about time scales. So up here, let's just change color a little bit. Where are we? So up here, we're looking at probably a 3-year horizon for those objectives. And this goes against some of the modern thinking that everything is annualized. You know, if you want a transformational change in the organization, yeah, it's going to take more than a year. I'd love to tell you that it's not, but it will. So you need to maintain that direction for more than that financial year. And of course, we have got caught into those traps of trying to report back to shareholders the performance for that particular year, and we've got stuck with that year. But actually the benefits lower in the organization, the outputs are greater when you combine it with a longer term aim. So here you've got 3 years, but here you've probably got a year or 2 years. So at that local level, they are shorter plans, and at this level they could be 6 months or even 1 year. So what happens, you need to look at the strategies and consider that they can't, or in that particular area of the business, they can't be deployed all in one go. So you need a project hopper, you know, a way of prioritizing what those might be. But if you see the concept, 3 years, 1 year, 6 months, people are taking the big stuff from the big thinking and converting it into things that they can influence at that level. And instead of going off, and I mentioned it before, ad hoc, working on initiatives that just seem to be good for that area, it should, in essence, be joined up with everybody else, especially with the benchmarking experiences. Okay, so that's a sort of graphic way of describing OGSM, and I have touched on some of the softer things as well with the involvement of people. So let's have a look at a hypothetical one just to give you a sense of what I'm trying to say in terms of the words. So let's just put it in here. Let's get rid of you. And let's remind ourselves, these are words only. These are numbers. Important that we differentiate this rigor of making sure. And, you know, I know you're probably there going, well, that's obvious. But it's amazing how working with people, they want to put a number inside an objective, or they want the measures to be adding up to what the goal is. But that's not really the case. So we've got words, numbers, and it's important as it cascades down. So this is an hypothetical. So this is I'm starting a new venture. This is a jam factory, okay? So first of all, I'm going to work on the objectives. And as I said, there are key 4 big, bold areas of business improvement. So I want to eliminate unsafe behaviors. I want to increase the capacity. I want to be able to make more jam with the equipment, the assets that I've got. I want to get into bigger markets. I want to get into the big supermarkets. I don't want to just supply the cottage industry shops. And I want to make more money because we've got a big asset in the jam filling lines, the production lines. And I want to make more money because I want to reinvest it in new opportunities. So they're the 4 big objectives. So for each of those, I'm going to put some numbers. And of course, literally, there are some words, else we wouldn't understand what the numbers meant. But no lost time actions, 0. So I could write 0 in there, and it's still within the rules of OGSM. It's still a number. So I've got the numbers down there. So I want to increase by 1 million jars of jam a year. That doesn't sound too much, actually. That seems quite doable. A million cases a year, let's say. All right. I want to increase. I want to get into those big Tesco's and Super Sainsbury's and those places. Okay. So that's going to provide me, that the goal is that provides the company with £2 million worth of increased sales. So I've got hard numbers there, and profit before tax, 15% increase or greater. So I've put numbers next to those words so they can be quantifiable, they can be measured, and we can track them. All right. So how are we going to do those things? So in safety, we're going to run a behavioral safety program. We're going to obtain some new accreditation. And I've put some tracking numbers there because it's basically doing those things with the organization in my way. You could put different numbers in here, but those numbers relate to implementation. So if we've run a behavioral safety program, which will reduce incidents, it will encourage people to address unsafe behavior. If all employees have been through that process and there's refresher processes as well, et cetera, then that's going to make a difference to the goal. And likewise, I've put strategies next to increasing capacity. We're going to improve reliability of those jam lines. They're breaking down quite a bit. They're not making as much jam as they should do. We're going to have a performance improvement. We're going to improve quality because we're getting lots of returns. That's a lot of rework. We're not going to make a success of this business unless those things are addressed. And those individual programs have different business trackers. Again, it's not adding up to the goal. It's making sure that we're putting in the strategy effectively. And likewise, market share, increase sales, increase other products. Let's explore the opportunity of, well, at the moment it's jams. Could it be marmalades? Could it be mustard? Could it be pickles? All those sort of opportunities. And again, the numbers relate to those activities. Increase profit. Let's try and reduce the amount of money it costs to actually produce these jars of jam. And let's improve our margin. Let's try and find ways that we can take some of the cost out of it to improve the sales. Let's get the sales guys trying to get another 20p on a jar of jam, because it's worth it, because it's brilliant stuff. So again, the measures are associated with that. So total delivered cost, less than 80% of wholesale, and operating costs greater than 25% reduction. So all those things relate, and that then becomes something for the managers of Martin's Jams to go out into their areas, and as I said before, take that, cascade it down into their part of the business. So that's an illustration of the most simplest of templates. And I'll be honest, I've been to many organizations where they showed me their plans, and there's a trillion words on those things. They've rolled them out on large tables. They've got diagonal lines, all sorts of, you almost need, quadratic equations to work out where some of it fits. So it's very simple. It's meant to be simple because the concept is about implementing. It's about understanding. And as that gets cascaded down, it adds a little bit more complexity, but that complexity is only in the confinement of the area that knows how to work on those individual objectives when they're cascaded down. So that's an illustration of OGSM in a very simple form. I'm not considering making jam. There's an awful lot of good companies out there that do it better than startups, but there you go. So that's an example. So as a way of illustrating more examples, I've now got some case studies. So what does this look like in practice? So here's one example. This is a packaging company in Scotland, UK, and the template that they've expanded upon is very similar to the one that I showed earlier. So what they did was they had a 3-year vision, all right, and I'll show you little bits of that in a minute, not word by word. They did a top level, and they only split, so they had 3 packaging factories, and what they did was they split tier 2 down to only 2, and this is a key important learning, and there's variations on this, but what they basically did was they split down from tier 1 to create tier 2 in operations, so that covered all the 3 locations, and sales and commercial, which covered those areas as well, but worked out of head office. So 2 is then this is where simplicity is really key, because it's very easy to say, well, how many senior managers have we got at sort of board level? 6, because we've got finance, we've got HR, we've got this, we've got that. And then every one of those takes down from tier 1 and tries to create their tier 2 plans. And it doesn't work. It gets too heavy, gets too abrasive between the different functions. And what was agreed, and it wasn't agreed like in a minute, but it was agreed that supporting functions like finance and HR wouldn't have their own tier 2s, because that would create lots of additional work at a high level, because we're trying to keep it simple at a high level. But what they would do is they would dovetail key initiatives that they would support at various different strategies within operations and sales and commercial. So once that tier 2 was developed, again, don't forget everybody was involved at tier 1, only operations went down to a tier 3. So sales at commercial stayed at a tier 2 level. So tier 3, plant number 1, plant number 2, plant number 3, very similar equipment, incidentally, very similar operating principles in all 3, but they developed their own strategies based on the strategies and measures being cascaded down. Don't forget what I said earlier in the process. And then from that, there were no other layers of objectives in the business, only either chartered projects or individual projects being owned by key managers or supervisors in the business. And what this enabled this company to do was to then make sense of the supporting infrastructure. So what they did on this map, as the process was being developed, was they incorporated what would senior managers do in terms of one-to-one reviews and coaching sessions. There would be the MD and seniors, there would be middle managers, there would be operational line managers, there would be the individual projects. And this made sense of meetings, regular reviews, because they were all reviewing things. If you go back to what I said earlier, if just change the color a bit, somebody working on that project was working on something that was aiming for the change in the organization. So one-to-one coaching was integrated into it, regular meetings that also produced reports and communications to outside of the Scottish operation to the wider business. And also it put in the softer things, because all these things were being worked on. As I said, it's a set of drawers where you put things. So things like effective communication and appropriate behaviors, these were sort of in a tapestry sense, they were integrated into this work. So to make OGSM work, we needed the right behaviors in the business. So they were sponsored and championed by the senior managers as well. So not just the hard numbers associated with the OGSM levels, but also how people were expected to behave in this structured approach. So moving on from that example is a senior manager. He has in his office paper versions. I know it's not very trendy, but it's better than it's, what you can see, you can start to believe. If you don't see things, you don't always believe things. So he's got in his office, and he uses on a regular basis, OGSM. So on that board, obviously him in his office, and he's got that as a practical, almost a vertical office to, as I said, one-to-ones, meetings in his office. He can relate to what's going on with the OGSM. So he would be able to physically touch the various different parts of OGSM, and whoever he was talking with in the office, they could relate to what their plans were and where they should be going, and with all the various different tracking activities. A slightly closer view. So here we go would be inappropriate for you to be able to read this. There's the vision. There's the tier 1. That drops down to tier 2 operations. This is the appropriate meetings that feed into working on these strategies. And these are the trackers that are feeding into the successful implementation of the strategies. Go down to tier 3, and instead of having rows and rows of tier 3, they're on a ring binder, but they are the individual department areas within that plant. It could easily be, we've done this in non-manufacturing. It just happens to be a very visible example to show you. So And then there's various different supporting bits of data and bits of documentation. And here is the chartered projects that are connected with the various different strategies. And he can clip those off the board. He can sit down at his desk. He can take a team through things. He can take his own managers through it, and it's constantly updated. So that's part of the review process that I've mentioned. So that's an example of that in his office. A little bit closer, you can see what I've already said, really. And then I just want to illustrate this a little bit. So this was to make sure that all the meetings, all the key meetings in the business had a very clear purpose, and each meeting had its own objectives to then connect directly with the strategies being delivered in the organization. So I won't dwell on that, but that's an important addition to the infrastructure of OGSM. So it's not simply writing objectives, goals, strategies and measures, it's putting in the mechanisms to make it work. And again, as I said, when I showed you the earlier photograph, clipped in there are all the key project charters. And the project charters are, in fact, a mini OGSM in many ways. Who's leading it? What are the key objectives? What are the strategies? What are the measures of success? Who's the team working on it? What are the key actions that are being completed? So it's all joined. Everybody that's working on improvements, and we try and engage as many people as possible, are all aiming towards that same endpoint. So the tips of the trade. So I've showed you an illustration, a case study, well, two case studies actually. That wasn't the same organization with the first one as you saw with the manager in his office. So here's some tips. Don't try and start everything in tier one. Don't try and control it. I've worked with senior managers, my business colleagues in New Leaf. We always see this as a challenge at the beginning. When you get a group of senior managers together, they start to create their vision. That's a great piece of work, or revise work that they've done before. But getting them to understand that just 4 big objectives with 2 or 3 strategies, maybe only 12 strategies at a top level, it doesn't seem to be enough. But if the process is right and the process is implemented, it creates hundreds of strategies being managed at the right level. Start and improve as you go. So that's this one over here. So that's the tiers. So start and improve as you go. If we try and plan 100% success, I mean, everybody knows this, don't you, from experience? You can spend months and months and months planning, getting the OGSM all nicely done. But reality is, once you start to review, so that's the important thing, is learn by doing. Plan, do, review, improve. So in the very early stages of starting, as well as getting the scope clear, we must get this idea that we're going to learn by doing. We don't have to get it right. And of course, people that are committing to stakeholders and others, or their line manager at a lower level, they don't want to appear to be a bit loose or a bit uncertain about a strategy. But actually, we could work and work and work thinking we've got the right strategies, but unless we're tracking them with the measures, we won't really know they're the right strategies for that objective. So unless we have the right thinking, the right mentality to go, let's start it, but we've got control of this, we've got the review processes, we can improve on it. I've already said that one there, agree on the scope. Is it going to be a planning exercise, or are we changing the culture? Try and prevent silo thinking. Get the people from sales and operations together. If you think about what's cascaded down from tier one, they're both, and this is the purpose. they're both given the same objectives because they've been cascaded down from the strategies. So sales will go, well, we're only sales. We don't want to work on improvements of efficiency in factories. Factories will go, we don't want to be working on margin increases. What can we do to improve that? Lots of things. So when you get those people together, it breaks down the silo thinking because lots of manufacturing people can improve on margin, can improve on sales. That one of the greatest sales tools is a highly effective production operation. Show new customers that, and they're buying into the bigger picture. There's lots of ways of influencing. So planning shouldn't be done in separate silos. The end result is less than good. So strategy deployment is as much about what you leave out as what you put in. This is, again, a sort of me pleading, if you're going to use this at a senior level. One of the things I learned in Procter & Gamble is, to be pretty smart at getting good plans together, getting good strategies together, is to agree on what you're not going to do. Because there's a temptation that you list everything that needs to be done and you try and do all of it. And of course, you know where that takes us. It takes us to, unfortunately, doing very little. So a little done well is very important. And of course, the iteration and the review process will allow us to bring new strategies into the process as we've successfully implemented the existing ones. So that's an important tip as well. Don't try and do too much, prioritize. And also you need somebody in the business or associated with the business to keep the process going, because most of the managers will be inside making those strategies work, making those objectives work, but it needs somebody to stand back and look at the overall picture, those drawers. Is everything in the right drawer? Is everything joined up correctly? Are the notes being played in the right order? It needs somebody to hold the mirror up to the organization to say, we're not using this process. We've got our nose to the grindstone and we've done the planning, but we've now walked away from it because it's a constant way of making continuous improvement in the business. More tips. Managers going from top level ought to take their managers out of the business. You can't do it whilst they're standing in call centers looking at processes. They need to be in a mentality of improvement. Don't be scared to be direct about these are the objectives that we're cascading down to you. And although I've illustrated in a relatively short amount of time, the basics, don't make rules your God. If it's right for HR to have it separate, cascaded down OGSM at tier 2, do it. Go no more than 3 tiers, and definitely, maybe only 2. If you work in a large organization with 10,000 people in 5 locations, don't think in an instant you'll be able to go down to all 5, and in each of the 5 you'll go down another 2 layers. You need to pilot things, and then that's learning for the rest of the organization. So that's a tip that we often ensure that people use. And also be realistic about what you can achieve. How many strategies can you really implement in a typical organization? Because if you go down 3 levels and all those levels have got strategies, you could end up with 2,000 projects. So they've all got to be scheduled. They've all got to be time sensitive, and not everybody can work on everything all of the time. There's never a perfect time. I mean, I talk to a lot of senior managers in big organizations, and they go, well, we'll be able to do this when something changes in the market. We'll be able to do this when something changes with finances. The truth of it is that always something comes. There's never a perfect time to do these things. So, I mean, we all know about COVID. Who could see that 5 years ago? So there's always something that's going to come and challenge our thinking about making improvements. So there's never a perfect time to do it. But as I said before, if you see it as a set of shelves that you put things in and it organizes it and it puts things in its proper place and it's effective for the organization, you just do it. And that learning by doing mentality that I mentioned before is critical as well. So very quickly going through the concepts, contact us, have more conversations with us. There's an ebook associated with this webinar. Please do the appropriate thing. I think it's a case of getting in touch with us, and we will send you one of the ebooks to give you a more broader and more in-depth understanding of the process. And call anytime to have informal chats. So based on that, please get hold of us and have an ebook, but also questions and answers. So I'll just go to this screen here now and see if there are any outstanding questions that you've asked. Now's the time to do it. If you've got a question, just use the chat line and I will do my best to answer it. If I can't answer it, I'll think about it and come back to you. So please use the chat line. Please raise your hand, one or the other. I will be able to understand what you're asking. Any questions coming through? It always goes a bit quiet at this point, but you've got the contact details on the screen there. Any further questions? We're just coming to an end. I know I said 1 hour, so we're reaching that point. So if there aren't any other further questions, there have been some other questions that we've captured and we will get answers to you. But apart from that, thanks for attending, and look forward to any further questions you might send, and certainly make contact for the ebook. So thanks for your time, and look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Okay.